Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here. So for our latest DCUSH episode here on YouTube, we're going to be starting off here on Unit 5, which is really kind of getting us towards America kind of going in the 1820s and the 1830s. And today we're going to be looking at political parties and then also the very, very special election of 1824. So let's get started. Okay, so in this video lesson, I'm only going to really focus on the actual election of 1824 just because that will take a good deal of time to explain. Please just be aware there are some other activities that we definitely want to do beforehand, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to that election. Okay. Oh, and actually, before that, since we do have a micro mini lesson here that's about the growth of democracy and political parties, we can go ahead and do this one too. Okay, so what we're looking at in this lesson and our objective here is we're trying to understand, first of all, what is a political machine and how is it run, okay, and you'll understand what those terms mean, excuse me, and then also the conflicts that lead up to the election of 1824 and what was the outcome of the election itself, okay, so democracy, Jacksonian democracy, political parties. Let's talk about them. So we're going to be looking here at, again, this tricky thing, democracy, about how much people should have, like what's the correct amount, somewhere between, the purge on one hand, and then on the other side, kind of like absolutely, no choice at all. And then do political parties empower or encumber democracy? Do they make it stronger, or do they weaken it or limit it? Okay, so the invention of the modern-day political party. We're going to be talking lots here about voting and suffrage. Suffrage is the right to vote, not suffering as in, the suffering you're encountering right now by having to watch this. Okay, so suffrage, the right to vote, is expanding, and that's definitely happening here as we are kind of transitioning out of the first 20, 30 years of this American experiment, and by about 1830, nearly all white men can vote. And mostly this is due, and again, this is not something that we're really familiar with today, is that the fact that you had to own land in order to vote. There was a land requirement, and those requirements are starting to disappear. And so what we're starting to see is that the electorate, the people who are able to vote, is starting to grow. And with that comes much stronger, much more robust political parties. Okay, and really what we're going to define a political party here as is a group that promotes political agendas or ideologies. So for example, we've been talking about the Democratic Republican Party. Really it's just a group of people that are interested in some kind of policy for some kind of specific reason. All right. Now, when we get to the 1830s, and really even actually before that, we get something new because we have had political parties up until this point. We've had the Federalists until they died. We've had the Democratic Republicans. We're still kind of going on, but we're going to have this new kind of a 2.0 of the political party, and that is something called a political machine. Okay, and what are these things? Well, the first really very strong kind of example of a party is probably Martin Van Buren, this guy up here, and he invents kind of this new level of a political party that is going to be called what we call a political machine. So his party was called the Bucktails, just for a local nickname that this group had. But a political machine, okay, just to define what the difference is between a political party. A political machine is a incredibly highly organized party that not only does it have certain ideologies that it believes in, it believes in certain policies, but it also then provides services to the people who are a part of it. Okay, now, we don't really have necessarily anything like this today. I mean, obviously, we still do have political parties, but the level of kind of a reciprocal relationship between voters and the party is something that's very unique compared to what we have right now. And so, what is it? Well, what are these services? What do we mean by this? A political machine is essentially, it's a party, but they're going to give their members an incentive. And they're going to provide services to those members who vote for them. essentially. Okay, and so the deal is that as long as their voters and their members vote for them when election day comes around, they'll provide services, favors, patronage, which is political positions, to those folks. And so, for example, like if you were known to be an incredibly loyal Democratic Republican, for instance, they would, perhaps reward you for with some patronage of being a judge or a sheriff or perhaps running a post office, those kind of things. Okay, and this gives political parties, these political machines, it gives them an incredible amount of power and an incredible amount of sway. Okay. And it really does go to a level that we're not really used to today, although it still absolutely is there. Patronage and kind of the idea that you are now giving people jobs based on who they are, not what they can do. Okay, so it is a whole new kind of thing, and it's called the spoils system, which is kind of named after the phrase, to the victor goes the spoils. So if you win, or this, if your side would win, basically you, depending on how much you participated, might be given a job, or kind of like you would have much more influence because of the connections that you have, and not because of your actual merits. And this introduces a whole heck of a ton of corruption into U.S. politics, because again, like, these are people who are not exactly qualified to do their jobs very well, although many of them still absolutely were, but it also kind of now sets up this dynamic where you have the official U.S. government that is not really like the Constitution, that doesn't have these kind of machines built into it, but underneath them are all of the machines that are really getting stuff done. And what I mean by that is, like, if you wanted to get a job, you went to your local, Democratic Democrat machine boss, and there would be bosses who would lead these parties, and they would give you a job. Or if you needed health care, you would go to them, and they would pay for your hospital bill as long as you voted for them on election day. And so kind of the question is then is like, there's definitely these, things that these machines provide that haven't been there before, but are they necessarily a good development? Is this the way that you want democracy to be run? And I'm not really sure if there's a right or a wrong answer to that. Probably depends on kind of your position. Okay, so go ahead and watch this video. It kind of gives you another good explanation of it. But for now, we're going to skip right along, okay, and we'll skip this activity, to the five-way fiasco of 1824, or what Andrew Jackson will call the corrupt bargain. Okay, and definitely here, all the stuff that we just talked about with political machines and parties is absolutely in play. Okay, so let's get going. So again, we're trying to summarize kind of the things that are leading up to this election, and then also what is the outcome. So how do economies develop and change over time? You're going to see the economy has kind of an important role here. And then what happens in the case of no candidate getting a majority in the Electoral College? Perhaps you remember the instance in which that happened before in the election of 1800. Okay. So anyways. Okay, so let's set ourselves up here with some context. After the War of 1812, due to a few different events, okay, the Alien and Sedition Acts, the Hartford Convention, the Federalist Party has died. Okay, it is no longer really a thing. Yes, there are still some Federalists lingering around on the Supreme Court and a few things like that, but mostly they're gone. And so really the only party, being the Democratic Republicans, all the people running are technically Democratic Republicans. Now there's only one technical official candidate from that party, and that is that man right there, who is so unimportant we will never talk about him again. His name is William H. Crawford. He was the Secretary of the Treasury. He don't matter. The other people that really do matter are the four other Democratic Republicans who are going to be competing in this election of 1824. So let's take a look at them and meet them. Okay, so candidate number one is this man right here, Henry Clay. A picture here of him in his older years. Okay, but he was the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Okay, and talking about economies, since we are now in the market revolution and the very beginnings of the Industrial Revolution for the United States, that's going to become a big issue in this election. And Clay runs on a program that he called, in many speeches and things like that, he called it the American system. And basically what this was is a whole bunch of funding and kind of other measures to internally develop the United States. And what internally develop means is that he is going to try to build kind of the infrastructure that is going to speed along this market revolution. So roads, canals, so all the things that kind of make the market revolution continue to keep going. Again, if you remember from our Federalists, kind of a riff off of them, he's going to get this from tariff revenue. So as you can imagine, this is pretty popular in the West, which needed these kind of things, but he's not very popular in the South because farmers don't like tariffs. They have to get their stuff from somewhere else. So, candidate number 2, it is the grandson of John Quincy Adams. He's the former Secretary of State. He's basically kind of just another version of Henry Clay, but he's especially popular in his home base, New England. Okay, and by the way, at this time, being Secretary of State was thought of as being like the stepping stone to being president. So for him, this is kind of his next step along his political journey. All right, so number 3, John Calhoun. Okay, John Calhoun is a Southerner, but besides being a Southerner, he is at this time a Unionist. Okay, now I bring this up, if you don't know what I mean by Unionist, that means he is a person who believes that the federal government should be in charge, even though he is a Southerner. He believes that the national government should be more powerful than the state governments. Okay, he's the former Secretary of War, and I bring all this up about him being a Southerner and wanting the Union to stay intact because, as you'll see later, he completely changes his opinion, just kind of like Madison does. But he does actually drop out through the election in support of candidate number 4, and that is Andrew Jackson, okay, who we have to talk about. So, Andrew Jackson is back from the Battle of New Orleans. He was the senator from his home state of Tennessee. Obviously a war hero from the War of 1812, and what makes Jackson a force to be reckoned with is that he has been building his party with the help of Martin Van Buren and a few other people, Calhoun being one of them, and this kind of rags to riches story that Andrew Jackson has. He was a pretty hard drinker, grew up in a very kind of like hard scrabble life. It kind of does make for a lot of people him this symbol of this broader kind of growth of democracy that's happening for many of these white men who are now beginning to be able to vote. And so who do you think will win? Well, I'll tell you, no one. Because when the vote happens at first, you can look right over here at the electoral vote. Okay, we see 32, 38, 14, and 16%. Now, Jackson being the man who got 38% of the electoral vote, even that being said, nobody gets 51%. And so the House gets tossed into, sorry, we got that backwards. The election gets tossed into the House, and a lot of backroom deals are going to happen. Now, you might remember, okay, what happens with this is we drop off candidates before it gets tossed into there. And you can see, again, kind of that, geographically, Jackson kind of taking the South and then taking even Pennsylvania up here. And Henry Clay, again, the Western states being kind of leaning his way. Adams being up here in the North, he's more popular. Things are going to happen. Okay, so the map aside, let's actually now take a look at what happens inside the House. Okay, this is what is called, notoriously afterwards, the corrupt bargain. So the House of Representatives has to choose between the highest vote getters. Okay, so that would be, now with the 12th Amendment being in place, okay, this would be Jackson with 99, Adams with 84, and Henry Clay with 37. Okay, so what happens from this then is quite a scandal afterwards. Clay, being the one who gets in third, uses his influence to get all of his 37 electors to give their votes to Adams, which would make him president. However, notice that Adams came technically in second. And so This is a huge deal, but then what makes it even worse is that Adams then turns around and makes Clay his Secretary of State. And Jackson, after this, is absolutely furious. He denounces the election, and he calls it, he says this is a corrupt bargain has taken place. And so that is the end of the election of 1824. Okay, and Andrew Jackson, as you can be guaranteed, will get his revenge here very, very soon. Okay, so let's take a look here. We got 2 videos that I'd like you to check out to finish off the lesson, and that's the end of this mini lesson. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.